The sun, giver of light and life, shines most powerfully at the equator. Here, it powers an extraordinarily rich zone of life. Brilliant and bizarre species from 3 continents, 3 oceans. More than a line on a map, Equator is a powerful force of nature. There's a place at the equator where unexpected creatures live side by side in a cold desert. Ice Age survivors meet tropical plants and animals on the flanks of active volcanoes in a country whose Spanish name, Ecuador, means equator. The Andes of South America are one of the most unusual places at the equator. Every day here is a battle between sun and ice, hot and cold. The paradox of the Andes is that the closer they are to the sun, the colder it becomes. The highest slopes are an alpine desert the Quechua Indians call Paramo, the inhospitable lands. Hummingbirds and camels are unlikely neighbors in a cold, stony desert. Vicunias are high-altitude specialists. They're resilient, able to live in a world which is unpredictable and ever-changing. Being at the equator, there are no seasons, no annual cycle of change. Instead, there's a strong daily rhythm of hot and cold. In a single day, this extraordinary bird must survive temperatures that can vary from below freezing to scorching hot. The tiny Ecuadorian hill star is a hummingbird, one that's forsaken lush tropical forests to live in one of the harshest places at the equator. Every day in the hill star's Andean home, a conflict rages between cold created by towering mountains and the heat of the sun. And this is just one challenge among many. In Ecuador, even the land is unpredictable and changeable. More than 25 million years ago, an enormous tectonic upheaval began along the western edge of South America, where the Nazca Plate collides with the South American Plate. This great geological collision continues, rumpling the continent up like a blanket at just 1 centimeter a year, slowly building the Andes, the longest mountain range on Earth. At the equator, active volcanoes are potent reminders of the power of mountain building. As the Nazca Plate is sucked under the South American Plate, intense heat and pressure cause the rock to melt. When the pressure of molten magma can no longer be contained, it explodes to the surface as an immense volcanic eruption. These are among the most active volcanoes in the world. On the high slopes of a 6,000-meter peak, the morning sun dries the wet coat of a newborn vicuña. It's warm now, but last night temperatures dropped to -6 degrees Celsius. If the baby vicuña had been born then, he would have frozen to death. But he's blessed with wool that's among the finest and warmest in the world. And female vicuñas always give birth during the day to give their offspring the best chance of survival. Just 2 hours old, the young male is already keeping up with his mother. The dominant male watches over his big herd of females and this year's young. He's alert for danger. The presence of the newborn has attracted a young hawk, hoping to scavenge afterbirth. Vicuñas have few predators. Their biggest challenge comes from the mountains. The newborn's herd mates will recognize his distinctive smell for the rest of his life, even after he's forced out of the herd by his father in a few months' time. In the featureless Paramo, scent is an important landmark. The vicuñas use dung piles as signposts. They leave calling cards for other herds which share the sparse feeding grounds. Despite daily temperatures that may vary by more than 30 degrees, fine wool keeps the vicuñas warm. And like vicuña wool, the hairy coat of this plant also traps heat. It's so effective it can be more than 7 degrees warmer inside the plant than outside. This is a brutal place, and plants seek warmth where they can find it. They stay low to the dry ground or seek shelter next to rocks. The high Paramo plant's ability to endure cold was honed a long time ago, during the great ice ages. More than 20 times over the last 2.5 million years, the Paramos have been pushed down into the lowlands by freezing temperatures and growing glaciers. Then as temperatures rose and lowland forests expanded, the Paramos retreated back to their mountain-top strongholds. The last ice age ended about 10,000 years ago. But the tops of these volcanoes at the equator are still locked in ice and glaciers year-round. Even during the day, it's -5 on the summit. Yet 2,000 meters below, it's 10 degrees warmer. The lower flanks of the volcano are a completely different world. In sheltered places, the low Paramo is a rich shrubland. Elsewhere, it's lush grassland, home to a remarkable Ice Age survivor. This is a rare encounter with a most elusive animal. A spectacled bear may roam more than 20 kilometers in a day through the vast wilderness of the low Paramo. This young female is looking for food, for plants and fruits. But for now, she must search elsewhere. From the other side of the valley, an Andean condor watches the bear's progress. The condor is an icon of the Andes. And this rugged valley is a perfect home for a nesting pair. The pair takes it in turn to incubate their single egg. After more than 50 days, the egg is close to hatching. The female signals to her mate that she's about to leave the nest. The egg will chill rapidly if it's left alone for more than a few minutes. The male must soon take over incubation duties. The equatorial sun is the condor's ally. Its heat creates thermals of rising warm air for them to glide on. Their highly visible presence is a warning to other condors to stay away from their breeding territory. Condors are long-lived and only breed every second year. Once this egg hatches, it'll be more than a year before the youngster is independent of its parents. With wings spanning more than 3 meters, condors are the largest land birds in the world. Far below them, the world's smallest birds, the hummingbirds, are the low Paramo's most active residents. The sparkling violet ear is a tiny, agile acrobat who beats his wings nearly 20 times a second. Because the sun nurtures year-round flowers here at the equator, hummingbirds have an active, sugar-fueled lifestyle. This hyperactive bird weighs just a few grams. He must drink nearly his own body weight of energy-rich nectar each day. After feeding, the violet ear rests, waiting for the flowers to recharge their nectar. The low Paramo shrubland waits to be recharged with moisture that comes from the 2 great weather systems that meet at the Andes. Warm, moist air rising from the Amazon collides with damp air from the Pacific. As the warm air rises up the volcano's slopes, it cools and condenses into cloud. The plants of the low Paramo trap the damp cloud and drip feed it to the ground. The lower slopes of the volcanoes are a living sponge. This well-watered valley is home to a female spectacled bear. She has a cub that's nearly a year old. Spectacled bears are named for the markings on their faces. Each bear has a mask as unique as a fingerprint. The male cub will soon be independent, but for now he's his mother's pupil. Each day, as they search for food, they move between the low paramo and the cloud forest. At 3,500 meters altitude, the temperature averages a benign 8 degrees. It's warm enough for trees to grow. Warmed by the sun and moistened by mist, the cloud forest is one of the richest habitats on Earth. The forest offers a damp home to an incredible array of plants and animals. In Ecuador, spectacled bears live alongside 18,000 different kinds of plants. There's such fierce competition for space among plants that more than 20% of them perch on branches like birds. Among the perching plants are an incredible diversity of bromeliads. Their tightly fitting leaves trap water and create miniature frog ponds high above the ground. After many years perching, most bromeliads flower just once in their life. On a single spectacular spike, tiny flowers open one after the other. A glowing puffleg knows he'll find nectar here for many weeks. The many bromeliads feed many hummingbirds, more than 130 species in Ecuador alone. A rainbow star frontlet feeds from an unusual bromeliad whose flowers sprout on slender stems. Scientists have only recently recognized that the tropical Andes are the world's most outstanding biodiversity hotspot. These forests are exceptionally rich in plant and animal life because they're both on the slopes of the Andes and at the equator. The cloud forest provides a year-round supply of flowers and fruit for nearly 1,600 species of birds. Golden-plumed parakeets are amongst the highest altitude parrots in the world. A pair have a nest high in a tall, dead tree, a location also favored by bromeliads. Spectacled bears are also known as oso acupallero, the bromeliad-eating bears. But most bromeliads grow high up to catch as much sun as possible, so that's where the female heads. In the paradoxical world of the equatorial Andes, it's no surprise to find an Ice Age bear feeding on tropical plants high in a tree. Bromeliads are plentiful and available all year round. They're a sensible choice for bears that eat in bulk. Bromeliads are also rich. The female targets the tender heart where the sugars and proteins are concentrated. Spectacled bears are South America's only species of bear, and they're the best climbers in all the bear world. The cub is determined to join his mother, but although he has the will, he does not yet have the skill. Spectacled bears are dedicated plant eaters, ironic as they're descended from the largest land carnivores that the world has ever known. Their ancestors were the short-faced bears that thrived in North America during the Ice Ages. Spectacled bears are the short-faced bears' only living descendants. They're Ice Age relics, perfectly adapted to the cold. High above the struggling cub, his mother leaves a trail of destruction as she feeds, pushing over the bromeliad's frog ponds and showering the forest with cloud water. The cub is a fast learner. On his second climbing attempt, he makes much better progress. In Ecuador's Andes, a journey from sea level to the summit of a 6,000-meter volcano is like traveling from the equator to the North Pole. The higher you go, the colder and more challenging it becomes. It means that this high-altitude cloud forest is similar to brown bear habitat in places much further north, such as Canada. But there's one big difference. Canada's bears must cope with an enormous variation in temperature between summer and winter. But here at the equator, there are no seasons. Food is always available, and animals live here all year round. There are no long, bitter winters, so bears don't hibernate, and birds don't migrate. But they all face a daily challenge of weather which is changeable, unpredictable. The sun wins a late morning skirmish with the cloud which subsides into the valley. In just a few minutes, the seasons change from spring to summer. Many creatures have found opportunity in this unpredictable world. This is a puya, a remarkable bromeliad that's moved out of the forest up into the low paramo. Some hardy hummingbirds have moved too. The tropical puya has become a giant. It now lives on the ground instead of perching in a tree. Its 5-meter-tall flower spikes are enough to feed 2 hummingbirds. But hummingbirds are very territorial about their food and don't like sharing. The puya has evolved a hairy coat to keep its flowers warm, and fierce spikes for protection. Puyas are well adapted to the low paramo, but that's as far as they can go. Only the hardiest creatures survive on the volcano's higher slopes. Vicuñas are one of the few animals resilient enough to endure the high paramo. Today they're baking in a summer heat wave. The temperature has soared into the 20s. But it could change quickly. This is a place of extremes. In minutes, it could be close to zero. Up here, most plants hug the ground for warmth. But chuquiragua bushes stand defiantly a metre or more above the ground. They flaunt bright flowers year-round to seduce an unexpected pollinator. It's the highest altitude hummingbird in the world, the hill star. The bright pollen on this female's head shows she's found a good supply of chuquiragua flowers. The tiny hill star has 2 chicks. This resilient solo mother has built a thick, well-insulated nest to protect them during her frequent absences. It's a good thing. The equatorial sun disappears behind clouds and the heat wave vanishes. The high paramo is plunged into a misty autumn. The weather is always changeable, but one thing remains a constant challenge up here. The air is thin. At 4,500 meters, each breath contains only half the oxygen it does at sea level. But despite low oxygen levels, vicuñas can sprint at nearly 50 kilometers an hour. And when a male chases other males away from his herd, what begins as a sprint can turn into a marathon. How do vicuñas sustain this effort when the air contains so little oxygen? A vicuña can use all the oxygen available in every breath of this thin air. Its blood contains red cells that are very small, able to quickly absorb oxygen, and has twice as many red cells as human blood. The blood is also very thin and easily and rapidly pumped by its big heart to hard-working muscles. Physiologically, vicuñas are better adapted to altitude than any other mammal. And hill stars are better adapted to life here than any other bird. But high altitude throws another challenge at the hill star. The air up here is half as dense as air at sea level. It's harder to fly. So, unlike hummingbirds lower down the volcanoes that hover as they feed, the hill star perches to conserve energy. Vicuñas face constant challenges from each other. But rivalry is key to their survival. Tensions are rising in the bachelor herd, among the outcasts who've been unable to claim a group of females. A pair begin to squabble, and their mood proves contagious. Fights begin to break out in the herd as males pair off and square off. All these males aspire to lead a herd, but fewer than 20% of them will ever succeed. To gain leadership, they'll have to fight the dominant male, and frequent combat is the best way to hone their fighting skills. The sparring partners bite and kick and attempt to bring their opponent to his knees. Size, strength, skill, all factors which will determine the winner. One fight turns into a grudge match. Fighting is usually less physical, more psychological. But today the dueling duo can't resist a complete brawl. The duo is well matched in size and stamina, and the result is a draw. Vicuñas not only face challenges from each other, they face a direct challenge from the sun. The equator receives much more solar radiation than any other part of the world. The sun is at a direct angle to the equator, so its rays travel a shorter distance through the Earth's atmosphere and are less likely to bounce back off ozone and other molecules. Levels of damaging ultraviolet radiation are 1,000 times higher at the equator than at the poles. Animals and plants up here are protected from radiation by hairy coats and frequent thick mists. The little hill star is a tenacious survivor. These chuquiragua bushes offer him security in an ever-changing world where there can be 4 seasons in a day and sometimes in an hour. The mist engulfing the high Paramo is caused by warm air rising up the flanks of the volcanoes. Lower down, it has created intense thermals. As the sharp-eyed condor soars on thermals, one of the strangest and rarest Paramo inhabitants arrives in the valley. The size of a small cow, the mountain tapir is the largest animal in the Andes. The unlikely-looking tapir has even more unlikely distant relatives, horses and rhinoceroses. Like the bears, the tapirs are Ice Age survivors. They live in remote, rugged areas. Mountain tapirs are the bulldozers of the Paramo. They create trails that other animals, such as bears, use as highways through the thick vegetation. In this changeable world, being big is a good thing. Bulk is useful for pushing through dense scrub and for keeping warm. Tapirs are mostly solitary, and they have enormous feeding ranges. Because they're so rare and range so far, it's unusual to see two animals so close to each other. Very little is known about these shy giants. These two seem content to get on with the full-time task of eating the leaves and fruits of many different kinds of plants. There are 3 species of tapir in South America, but the mountain tapir is the only one that's gone high, to find opportunity in a place with few competitors or predators. The mountain or woolly tapir has evolved a coat that's black to absorb as much heat as possible from the sun and is thick for warmth. It's well prepared for the biggest challenge for all life in the equatorial Andes, surviving the long night. Like the tapir, the spectacled bear family has spent most of the day eating. It's late afternoon, and the cub is exhausted. Soon his mother will lead him to a safe resting place. The young bear has only a limited time to enjoy himself up in the treetops. He's already the same size as his mother, 1.5 meters long and weighing 60 kilograms. When he's fully grown, he'll be much larger. A male spectacled bear in his prime may weigh up to 180 kilograms. He'll be far too big to climb these high branches. To survive here, bears rely on their climbing skills and the rich bromeliad offerings of the cloud forest. Down in the valley, the tapir strategy is to have an eclectic palate, to eat a little of everything. They never linger too long in one place and spread seeds as they travel long distances through the paramo. As evening approaches and temperatures drop, the thermals lose their power. The condors are forced to come in to roost on their nesting cliff. They'll incubate their egg through the long, cold night. The condors have more than a year of parenting ahead of them. Hummingbird motherhood, on the other hand, is fleeting and intense. It took the female hill star less than 3 weeks to incubate her eggs, and in another 3 weeks or so, her brood of 2 will have left the nest completely. She gives her babies their last feed of the day and tucks everyone in. They must all stay warm if they're to survive the night. This snug nest is home only while she raises a family. Nearby, a young female with no chicks faces her usual lonely night. She'll survive 12 hours without feeding by putting herself in torpor, using as little energy as possible. The hill star's heart rate is now a 20th of its normal speed. Her body temperature's dropped from 36 degrees to 6. The equatorial sun departs quickly. A mini ice age is about to begin. Down in the low Paramo, a stream flows strongly. It never freezes, even though the temperature has dropped to -6. This is the nocturnal hunting ground of an extraordinary creature. The fishing mouse is a small, fierce predator with an unusual lifestyle. She'll spend much of the night searching the stream for aquatic insects or fish. Like the bear and the tapir, the fishing mouse is an ice age survivor designed to withstand cold. Her solid body holds heat and her fur is thick, warm and waterproof. Also known as a water mouse, the fishing mouse is now very rare. It was once more widespread, but by the end of the ice ages, it had become a relic found in just a few streams. Eyesight and smell are of little use in this nighttime world. She uses long, tactile whiskers to detect prey. For a successful catch, she relies on fast reflexes, strong hands, and some luck. This species is extremely well adapted to this lifestyle. None of the small number of other rodents that also hunt in and around the streams of the Paramo are such good swimmers and divers. And only this species survives in the highest streams at altitudes of up to 4,000 meters. Like a hummingbird, the fishing mouse is small and hyperactive. She needs big meals often. The little mouse has a big appetite, and one fish is never enough. But she must hurry. 12 hours of darkness are drawing to a close. Dawn on the high Paramo. It's -6 and has been for hours. Everything's frozen, except, surprisingly, the plants. The plants of the tropical Andes have a remarkable way of staying metabolically active all the time. Even though the plant's sap is well below zero, it's still liquid because it's super cooled. It doesn't freeze into ice that would damage delicate cell walls. This strategy only works here because temperatures never drop below -6. If the nights were any longer and colder, a supercooled plant would risk snap freezing. The coming of the sun ends the mini ice age, but its morning kiss can be a plant's kiss of death. With the first sun on its leaves, a plant begins to transpire. Its sap begins flowing, but then it slows. The ground is still frozen. Roots can't suck up any water. Just when things should be getting easier, the plant faces physiological drought. But within an hour, the earth will have thawed and the plant will be able to drink again. Overnight, the hill star's temperature and heart rate drop dramatically. Now she comes back to life, warmed by the sun. It's not long before she's off to find her first quick sugar fix. The sun begins to breathe warmth back into the paramo. In just a few short hours, it'll be the height of summer. Hummingbirds are creatures of sun and heat that thrive here in the mountains at the equator. Because there are no seasons, there are year-round flowers they can rely on for energy-rich food. A Tyrian metaltail, slightly low on energy after the long winter's night, takes the easy option. Why hover when there's a handy leaf to take some of your weight? Luckily for these tiny birds, winter only lasts for one night, not for months on end, as in most other mountainous parts of the world. The condors must stay on the cliffs for an hour or two yet. They can't fly until the ground has warmed and the thermals have developed. There's always a battle here between equatorial heat and mountain cold. Every day, the creatures of the paramo and the cloud forest face the challenges of 4 seasons. The tropical puya is armed and prepared for winter. But its defenses are not enough to deter a male spectacled bear looking for a bear-sized meal. Animals and plants have taken different evolutionary paths to reach here. Some, like the bears, are survivors from the ice ages. Others, like the puya, are tropical species on a mountaintop adventure. Spectacled bears have short jaws and massive muscles inherited from their ice age ancestors. These give them power to crush and grind the tough stem of the puya. A lifetime of growing, destroyed in a second, eaten in minutes. This encounter between a tropical plant and an ice age bear could only happen here in the paradoxical world of Ecuador's Andes. Unexpected plants and animals have found new opportunities on these volcanoes at the equator. they've evolved ways of coping with the challenges that living at altitude brings. Persistence, perseverance, and a thick coat all help creatures survive the daily battles between the immense power and heat of the equatorial sun and the cold of the Andes.